I want to create my own fantasy world, but I don't know which backdrop to use. 1900s Midwestern farmlands. Oz, what a word. Composed of my two favorite letters. The land of Oz is one of those fictional worlds that is so well known yet simultaneously overlooked, I feel. Because while everybody knows the imagery of the Yellow Brick Road, the Emerald City, Munchkin Land, and all that stuff, I'm sure their knowledge doesn't go much beyond that. Which is a shame because I feel there's a ton of potential here for what is essentially America's Middle Earth. That sounded a lot weirder saying it than when I wrote it, but just hear me out. Whereas Middle Earth is in essence a mythologized adaptation of medieval England, Oz is a fairy tale adaptation of what was the then contemporary United States. Obviously with the main character coming from Kansas, but everything in Oz itself being inspired by Middle American iconography. Farmlands and meadows occupy a majority of the landscape, with picket fences lining the roads, one of the main characters straight up being a scarecrow from a field. The Emerald City isn't necessarily a kingdom, it's a city. Clearly supposed to reflect the excitement around rapidly growing metros at the time like New York City or Chicago. Listen, if you were some kid living in sun-beaten Kansas, this would sound like it was tailor-made for you. Now, am I suggesting Oz is anywhere close to Middle Earth?
No.
I don't think you fall asleep to Oz lore videos the same way you do with these, do you? But it's still a very interesting and uniquely American series which feels like it's always been a part of our lives. I think part of its success stems from how it came out at pretty much the perfect time, during the dawn of mass communication, which is where its relationship with film really begins. Early cinema was all about escapism, showing the audience scenarios, backdrops, and people that they wouldn't see otherwise.
Gadzooks, what's that?
That's a Frenchman.
My God.
So a world as ripe with imagination as Oz seems perfect for the big screen, right? Well, yes, but as you'll see, there hasn't really been that many stabs at bringing the world off of the page and onto the screen. Okay, there has been a lot, but nothing that has any sort of consistency. They're all just kind of doing their own thing in terms of story, continuity, aesthetics, etc. And there's one simple reason for it. This one's why. Everyone knows this movie. Everyone's grown up with this movie. Hell, I've been arguing for years that it's the most famous movie ever made. Because even if you haven't seen it, you have seen it. Everybody knows the characters, the setting, the story, the lines, everything. All because this one film is so ubiquitous in culture. Literally every show ever has parodied or referenced it in some form to the point where it's basically a rite of passage.
All we own, we own. All we own, we own.
And its impact on the franchise as a whole is so massive that every adaptation since will be compared to it. Which is why every film afterwards kinda gives the vague impression that they're related while still doing its own thing. Sort of. Like how in 1985 Disney made Return to Oz despite it trying to be its own thing story-wise and aesthetically. But if you're trying to do your own thing from the ground up, why would you start with a combination of the second and third books in the series? That'd be like Peter Jackson starting with Return of the King because the Ralph Bakshi film exists. I think they also know the only way to really make your own series from the ground up is to adapt the first book in the series, which would technically mean remaking the original, but no one wants to do that shit. Like how certain aspects of the book were altered by this film and have mostly remained as such in versions since. For example, in the book, Dorothy's slippers are actually silver, but were changed to ruby in the film. No official reason has been given why, but it was probably to show off the Technicolor that much more. Disney actually had to pay a license fee to MGM to feature them in Return to Oz. Also, the Emerald City technically was never emerald, at least not in the way it's been presented since the original film. In the book, everyone has to wear green glasses or else they'll be blinded by how brilliantly the city shines. So, naturally, the city will look green to them. Pretty much every version since then just says screw it and makes the whole city green. But I think they would have done this regardless if this film existed for simplicity's sake. But I think its biggest change is that this film is a musical, and not one, but 4 other Oz films after this are musicals. The fact that this is not only a musical, but one of the most famous of all time means the general public will always connect Oz with musicals in some way. It was a product of its time for sure, but I mean that in a complimentary way. Musicals were by far the most popular form of event cinema back then, essentially acting as the blockbusters of the time, so it's natural to make this film one as well. I mean, hell, when I was in high school, our senior year musical was The Wizard of Oz, with my own dog playing Toto. I think I'm getting ahead of myself, but you get my point. But Oz is so ripe with potential to be some kind of massive cinematic franchise, yet it just kind of never happened. Why is that? Well, nobody has the answer, so I guess I'm the one who has to find it out as usual. So I'm going to sit down and watch every single live-action Oz film until I find it. I'm not going to talk about the animated films or specials or anything like that. Just focusing on the live-action films, as I feel like that's where a lot of the discussion can be found. Sorry to any die-hard Journey Back to Oz fans out there. I'm also not going to give a ton of in-depth context regarding the earlier shorts, since there's not much to talk about beyond the historical context. Like, for example, the very first stab at a filmed Oz thing, the Fairylogue and radio plays. Developed in 1908 by L. Frank Baum himself, this was sort of a traveling multimedia experience based on the first 3 Oz books, which featured 23 filmed segments, actors, hand-tinted slides, and a narration by Baum. Sounds pretty cool, right? Well, actually, they ended up losing money by the end of its run, which according to the internet automatically makes something bad. Only lasting about 2 months, with unfortunately none of the film segments surviving. Sorry, Baum, you were just too ahead of your time. Seriously, this actually did sound kind of cool. 2 years later, a short was released based on the first book, which follows the events of the film in a very broad manner. Like, very broad, and was really only made since Baum lost the film rights to the Oz series due to the debt the radio plays left him in. And honestly is more of an adaptation of the Broadway musical of the same name from 1902. There's a lot of this donkey in these earlier films. He's just kinda always there. But I think this is a great example of showing why exactly the Oz series is so ingrained in culture. Pretty much since the dawn of cinema, there's been adaptations. The book itself was a bestseller on its own, sure, but capitalizing on a medium as explosive as cinema right from the beginning would ingrain it in culture that much more. Especially, again, with how imaginative the world itself is. It lends itself very well to film. But now we have our first feature-length Oz film, based on the 7th book in the series. In fact, this comes from a trilogy of Oz films, all produced by Baum and all released in 1914. His Majesty the Scarecrow of Oz and the Magic Cloak of Oz. They're based on various sequels in the franchise, so if your only frame of reference is the original story, you might get a little confused. What, you're telling me you don't know about Woozy the Cat? They're each under an hour or so, but I'm gonna skip over them since, like I said, I honestly don't really have much to say about them. Besides, I want to stop myself before I talk about Woozy. But the first proper feature-length film has to be The Wizard of Oz from 1925, once again adapting the events of the first book. Although I use that word very lightly since the film has almost nothing to do with the book itself. Maybe only like 5% of it is translated here. So, what's the story? Well, we open on this toy maker who's making models of the characters from the book. His granddaughter comes in and wants to read the book with him. Ooh, this one's meta. But right from the opening, you can tell how off things are. So Dorothy is actually a princess of Oz known as Dorothea. Why is this change here? Couldn't tell you. But as a baby, she was sent to Kansas by Prime Minister Cruel so he could be the ruler, with an envelope detailing instructions of what to do on her 18th birthday. And on her 18th birthday, they come to Kansas in a biplane to retrieve the letter. At the same time, the rest of the farmhands, none of which are given names by the way, fight for Dorothy's affection. Yeah, so basically the first half of this movie is just a barnyard slapstick. I legitimately forgot I was watching an Oz movie multiple times while watching it. But a classic Kansas tornado appears to whisk them off to Oz. In order to blend in there, they all dress in more Oz-affiliated outfits. This guy dresses as a scarecrow, this guy, played by Oliver Hardy by the way, dresses as a Tin Man, and this guy dresses as a lion. So again, this barely follows the plot of the original. They aren't actually these characters, they're just dressing up as them, overcomplicating it to the point where you can barely follow what's going on. Eventually they get to the Emerald City, which clearly has European and Egyptian influences, as Hollywood as a whole did at the time. And there are plenty of old Hollywood things I enjoy about the film, but there are times it certainly shows its age. Oh. Oh no. Oh, Jesus Christ. So Dorothy retains the throne, but they arrest the Scarecrow and Lion. They throw them into this underground pit where they're imprisoned by some pirates? Who take turns throwing guys into giant baths of something? I stopped trying to understand what was going on a while ago. Tin Man and Uncle Henry are anointed as knights by Cruel in an attempt to get on their good side so he can marry Dorothy. Luckily, Prince Kind comes in and kindly tries to fight Cruel. They have an epic sword fight, Kind wins, Scarecrow and the Lion Guy flee in a plane back to Kansas while Dorothy and Kind live happily ever after, the end. Yeah, this one's weird. It pretty much does its own thing, selectively borrowing what it wanted to from the book, putting it in whatever this is. Was there stuff I liked? Yeah, sure. It was generally well directed, there were some stunts I thought were well done, and the costumes were kind of cool. But the story was a mess. Not only a mess, but a self-inflicted mess. I don't understand what they were going for with this one. 4 out of 10. And at last, we have probably the only one you've seen. Except for that other one, we'll get to it. The Wizard of Oz is a film that is utterly fascinating on so many levels. From its story, to its cultural impact, to its hellish production. But for the sake of review, I'll only keep it to my thoughts of the actual film. And the actual film is amazing. Right off the bat, it sets up the world in a very believable way. Each of the characters in Kansas who double as Oz characters are established in an efficient, albeit not very subtle way.
Now look at Dorothy, you ain't using your head about, Miss Gulch. Think you didn't have any brains at all. She ain't nothing to be afraid of. Have a little courage, that's all.
Plus, we get to spend a lot more time with Dorothy as a character here. In the book, she's basically just some girl who gets sent to Oz by like page 4. Here, that happens at the 25-minute mark, which is perfect. All the stuff with Miss Gulch and the farmhands are unique to the movie, and you actually do feel the struggle of living in Kansas of all places, God forbid. Which is why Somewhere Over the Rainbow is so great. The movie is sepia-toned, and she sings the song on a farm. When you hear the lyrics about a rainbow, it moves you. But can you believe MGM actually wanted to cut this song due to them thinking Judy Garland singing in a farm was unbecoming? The same song that went on to win an Oscar and that the RIAA considers the best song of the 20th century. And once she actually lands in Oz, the music swells and the colors pop that much more because you've just spent the first chunk of the runtime getting used to the sepia tone. Still gets me every time. I think it was a good idea to overload the Munchkinland section with music numbers to really separate it from the Kansas section and also have it be the centerpiece of the whole film. It also helps that the songs are great. We aren't in Kansas anymore. We're somewhere whimsical. Like Massachusetts. Or maybe Vermont. I always love the shot of the witch just appearing in front of the house.
They're gone!
Each of the characters having their own establishing scenes one after another on paper would seem workmanlike in concept, but it works very well since they're all so distinguished from each other personality-wise, despite their songs literally being the exact same.
And my head, I'd be scratching that I could be kinda human if I only had the nerve.
The Tin Man's accent being so obviously Boston got me as well.
I'd be tender, I'd be gentle, and awful sentimental regarding love and art.
Pacing and editing are fantastic. I think this is a product of there really only being an A storyline, but also taking a fairly simple narrative from the book and streamlining it even more. Such as the witch not appearing in the book until like halfway through, whereas she's established as a threat right off the bat in the film, and appears several times throughout, which gives her this imposing feeling. It's things like this which give the story a more focused quality, which is why I consider it better than the book. As I said before, in the book, Dorothy is whisked away to Kansas super quickly, and it's merely implied how much of her life there wasn't good. But the movie takes its time where it needs to. I also have to point out how gorgeous the film is. We're creeping up on this being 100 years old, yet it still looks fantastic. I've always loved the lighting in the Wizard's Chamber in particular. Also, when they're in the Haunted Woods, it looks really good. You know, that scene where the scarecrow's packing heat. While I do consider it a masterpiece, there are some consequences of being a product of such a hellish production and 5 different directors. Again, not going to go into any detail about what happened, just stuff like... There aren't things that really break the immersion or take you out of it that much, but things like how they cut the jitterbug sequence, which was supposed to be this big dance number in the woods, and to this day the scene remains lost. So if anybody finds it, I'd be most appreciative. The witch even references it in the actual film.
I've set a little insect on ahead to take the fight out of them.
But the absence of it makes the scene feel a little rushed. Also, scenes like Hickory, or the Tin Man, was supposed to be working on a weather machine of sorts, which is why Aunt Em says,
I saw you tinkering with that contraption, Hickory. Now you and Hunk get back to that wagon.
with him being the only one of the 3 not having a foreshadowing to their Oz counterparts. But it's not enough to ruin the movie at all. I love that when the wizard is revealed, he's just frantically moving levers and valves around with no rhyme or reason. It's great. The pacing is perfect, the songs are great, the performances are fun, particularly Margaret Hamilton as the witch. It's a movie I don't think anyone could really tire from watching. 10 out of 10. And next up we have The Wiz. This is a movie I remember half watching when I was a kid, so I never really had an opinion on it. But upon properly sitting down to watch it now, I have a lot of thoughts. So remember how I said Oz is a world which taps into a uniquely American iconography and mythos? Well, this actually keeps in the spirit of that by having a backdrop heavily inspired by 70s black culture, which in and of itself is uniquely American and something I've always been quite a fan of. And this is an interesting one because it's kind of a bunch of different things at once. It's sort of a remake of the original 1939 film in that it follows the story pretty closely and maintains a lot of the changes from the book, but also retains some of the original things as well, such as the slippers being changed back to silver. So this is merely a one-off, different expression of the overall story. I like that. There is one major change that I was actually quite a big fan of. That being Dorothy is isolated by her own fears versus by circumstances like in Kansas. In the original, she's not exactly a timid person in Kansas. She just doesn't meet many people there because it's Kansas. But you can't exactly do the whole isolation angle in New York City, so instead she's alone because she's too scared of other people. The opening sequence takes place during Thanksgiving, surrounded by friends and family, but she's just sitting in the kitchen like a lost puppy.
What am I afraid of? Don't know what I'm made of.
So this makes her external conflict internal. For this specific iteration, I think that's really interesting. Sure, it kind of conflates her character needs with the lions, but again, I think it works. But as a complete package, this movie's a little bit of a mess. Now again, I like the embrace of that Brooklyn-style aesthetic, and the movie integrates it very well. Sort of. The opening of the film takes place in Brooklyn itself, but when she gets to Oz, it doesn't feel all that much different. I mean, yeah, it does with all the abstract characters and structures, but it doesn't really give you anything close to the feeling of when Dorothy falls into Oz in the original. Not saying you have to copy that tit for tat, but as it's presented, it doesn't have nearly the same effect. The pacing itself feels a little wonky too. The story seems to rush and slow down at random. This movie is a half hour longer than the original, yet it never really justifies it. Sometimes it feels like it's going through the motions way too fast, other times it moves glacially, such as the Emerald City sequence, which goes on painfully long. Now, I'm willing to forgive that to some degree, since there's plenty of longer dance sequences which go on for quite a while. Having people such as Michael Jackson and Diana Ross in your film, I can understand wanting to take full advantage of that. Speaking of which, one of the main things which always fascinated me about this movie was the casting, specifically Michael Jackson. This was that interim period from after he was famous but before he exploded in popularity, so it's genuinely surreal seeing someone who became a pop culture god play a side character in this one movie. Yet he was kind of the best part of it, reasserting my opinion that the Scarecrow is the best character in every Oz thing. The rest of the cast was very solid too. Diana Ross was good as Dorothy, although she definitely looked about 10 years older than who she was playing, because she was. I also enjoyed Ted Ross as the Lion, and especially Nipsey Russell as the Tin Man. There were some running jokes which I liked, such as the off-duty cabs or the Scarecrow pulling out random philosophical quotes from his stuffing.
A threefold cord is not quickly broken,
which was probably the most clever joke the movie has. And as I've said, the numbers themselves are very good, but the blocking and framing leave a bit to be desired. Sydney, you let me down, man. Everything is shot in these super wides with the choreography doing a bulk of the heavy lifting. There isn't really that much tension in the story since the Wicked Witch doesn't show up until like 90 minutes in, only being in 2 scenes but never leaves this little sweatshop lair set. So they kind of cram all the stuff with Dorothy getting captured and the rest of them getting tortured into this one scene. Gone is all the tension of trying to rescue Dorothy, instead we got the equivalent of gore. The witch is killed, all the workers do this dance, but when they go back to see the wizard, oh my god, it's Richard Pryor! Glinda pops in at the last second to make everything better, and Dorothy is whisked back to Brooklyn. This is a movie I really tried to like because there's a ton of individual things I enjoyed. The costumes were very interesting, there's some cool looking sets here and there, and most of the songs are actually very catchy. But overall, it's a fine movie that if it were tightened up a little more, could have been much better. 6 out of 10, but closer to a 5. Sorry. But less than a decade later, we got Return to Oz. This one is weird. In every way a movie can be weird, both in substance as well as production. This is based on the second and third books in the series respectively, The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz, being produced almost 50 years after the original, but not really a sequel to it like I said earlier. Do you see what I mean by this film dwarfing all the other adaptations? I'm not sure if they thought this was supposed to be a franchise or not, but it's certainly trying to cash in on the dark fantasy trend of the time. And trust me, this is dark. I mean, sort of. Yeah, it's got a lot of dark moments, but I feel like it's mainly when you compare it to how bright and cheery the original is. Sure, a lot of this stuff is pushing it for a kids movie, but it isn't exactly out of step with stuff like The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth. Kind of operates in the same space. This one gets more of a bad rep since, again, it's compared so much to the original. Yet it's pretty on brand with the Oz books themselves. So Dorothy has been unable to sleep ever since she went to Oz, but her family doesn't believe her, even when she shows them a key sent from Oz. So they ship her off to a mental ward to receive some electroshock therapy. Somewhere over the rainbow. But then Ozma, the Queen of Oz, appears at the hospital to set her free, but while escaping in a storm, she winds up back in Oz. Oh, and also instead of Toto, we have Billina the chicken.
Billina? Who else?
Now, I do like how we actually see a lot more of Oz this time, like the Deadly Desert. Also, since this was made for a decent budget for the time of $28 million, the effects are overall solid. Especially the gnome rock guys. Big fan. Same with the character designs. Well, some. Like characters such as Tin Man, the Tin Woodsman, and TikTok have cool overall designs, but then characters like the Wheelers look very fake. Speaking of the Wheelers, I hate them. They don't really do much except wheel around laughing. Never once feeling like a threat. But on her journeys, Dorothy runs into Princess Mombi. This evil princess who steals people's heads and swaps them around, who wants to kidnap Dorothy so she can steal her head too. But later on, while trying to escape, she accidentally wakes them up and they all start screeching. I have to see the wizard. She steals this dust that brings things to life, creating this abomination against God, which they call the Gump. A flying couch with a moose head.
I don't have any wings.
But while they're escaping, they meet this stick guy with a pumpkin head named Jack. An earlier creation of Mombi's who she keeps locked up like Hugo Simpson. And, unsurprisingly, served as the inspiration of Jack Skellington. They escape but are captured by the Gnome King, who turns out took all the emeralds back from the Emerald City, but claims were stolen from him.
All those emeralds in the Emerald City really belong to me.
He also kidnapped the Scarecrow, keeping him as a political prisoner by TFing him into an ornament.
I transformed him into an ornament, into an amusing and beautiful ornament.
But gives the rest of them 3 guesses each as to which one he is, and if they lose, they'll be turned into ones as well. But they outsmart the big rock guy and found out who is which ornament.
Oz!
Dorothy!
Also, the Scarecrow looks kind of weird here. Just a permanent smile that barely changes throughout the movie. Gnome King gets pissed and tries eating them, but Billina the chicken lays an egg into his mouth, which apparently is poison to gnomes. So he dies, they all teleport back to the Emerald City, all the emeralds are restored, and everyone is unfrozen. Mombi is caged like an animal, they have a big celebration, but when they offer Dorothy the chance to stay, she declines, only wanting to return to Kansas as usual. More electroshock therapy for you. She wakes up, sees Ozma in a mirror, and Aunt Em tells her to go play outside, thus concluding another epic Oz adventure. On its own, this movie is fine. The production value is to a very high standard for the time, but I don't know, it doesn't leave you with much. It tries being both a spiritual sequel and its own thing, but ultimately feels like another one-off adventure in this world. Dorothy goes to Oz, messes around, and comes back to Kansas. The end. The new characters are fine, but only act as stand-ins for the ones we already know. Jack is the Scarecrow, TikTok is the Tin Man, and the Gump is the Cowardly Lion. People dismiss this one as that one weirdly dark Oz movie, and while I can't say that's entirely unwarranted, you'd be ignoring some pretty decent stuff here. But overall, it felt like a tonally messy little adventure in Oz. If you're into 80s fantasy, knock yourself out, but otherwise, it's a fine little movie. 5 out of 10, but closer to a 6. And next up, we got The Muppets Wizard of Oz. Oh yes, a movie that's exactly what you'd expect. It's the Muppets retelling The Wizard of Oz, starring Ashanti as Dorothy and Queen Latifah as Aunt Em. When did this come out again? Okay, yeah, makes sense. Oh, hello, you. This overall comes off as a cheap shot-on-video TV movie. Because it was. I'm not saying my expectations for this are all that high, but this ain't no Muppets Christmas Carol, that's for sure. Dorothy works at Aunt Em and Uncle Henry's diner, but wants to audition for this talent competition to become a star so she can get out of Kansas. She leaves work early, but barely misses the audition time.
Please, I'm a star!
I'm sorry, it's too late.
She gives them her mixtape and goes home to her trailer to sulk. But then right on cue, the tornado comes and whisks them away. Also, Toto is a prawn this time, so they could turn him into Pepe. Dorothy steps into Oz, which this time reminded me of Roly Poly Oly. Why the hell am I making that kind of reference? They go through all the motions you'd expect, meeting up with the rest of them. Kermit playing the Scarecrow, Gonzo playing the Tin Man, and Fozzie playing the Cowardly Lion. But what's funny is, beat for beat, this is technically more accurate to the book than the original film. Dorothy has the silver shoes, they have to wear glasses in the Emerald City, and they each see the wizard one at a time instead of all together. I can only imagine they did this to differentiate themselves from the movie to avoid getting sued or something. Honestly, there isn't much to say about this film aside from some delightfully dated 2000s references.
You've been reborn!
Correction, you've been Osborne.
Good one.
And of course, it has plenty of your typical lambasting meta humor you'd expect from the Muppets, like seeing who the director is.
And then, just as Dorothy and the Wicked Witch charge at each other, bam! Blowout fight scene. The gals whip out these huge samurai swords, and they just tear it up. I'm talking kung fu. I'm talking walking on walls. I'm talking explosions everywhere.
2000s, man. You had to be there. They kill the witch. This one flying monkey talks about his humiliation fetish.
Like, you can have everyone spank me and call me names. Or not.
And the wizard, played by, oh geez, grants them their wishes. Dorothy goes home, now content with her Midwestern life. But then Kermit offers her the chance to tour with them after hearing her mix. She does, and they all live happily ever after. So I guess there is no place like home, except when it stands in the way of you getting what you want. Ohana means fuck you. Overall, this was fine. It really is just The Wizard of Oz, but with Muppets. So if you like either of those things and one day hoped there'd be some sort of inbreeding between them, then knock yourself out. 6 out of 10. So after almost 30 years, we get the first modern feeling Oz film. Oz the Great and Powerful is clearly supposed to start some sort of big franchise, which was on brand for Disney around the time. The early 2010s is when they were sort of funneling as much money as they could into anything they could make into the next big thing. Well, not only Disney, the whole industry was going this route. Star Wars and Lord of the Rings were over, and they weren't sure if the whole superhero thing was going to last very long. And in this confusion, we get such one-hit wonders as Battleship,
Chicken burrito,
John Carter, The Green Hornet, and Oz the Great and Powerful, to name a few. These were destined to take up the mantle and rule Hollywood, but that didn't happen. Avengers made a dumb amount of money, and superhero movies were unstoppable. Until they weren't. Speaking of superheroes, this time we got Sam Raimi behind the camera. Not a bad choice. Old Raimi's signature camera moves could lend themselves well to a film like this, especially since this was really pushed as a 3D film. As I said at the beginning of the video, Oz absolutely has the legs to be some sort of franchise, but in order to do the series justice, you need to do one of two things. One, either remake the original, which you know they would never do, or two, they'd make prequels or sequels directly tied to the original, which would create so many problems that I don't think they'd want to bother. Would you make them into musicals like the first one? Do you hire actors that resemble the original cast? Which is why so many of these movies selectively borrow from the original to give the loose relation for those who have seen the movie, because everyone has, while operating in the same hazy area of this is our own thing. Sorry if I seem redundant with this point, but it's true across the board with these. But to be fair, it does have a pretty different tone and structure. What those are, the movie never really defines. The tone is never consistent. Sometimes it's going for goofy comedy, sometimes epic action. You can have all those things so long as they're balanced correctly. But here they never quite are. The movie opens with Oz working as a carnival magician, which is presented in black and white and in 4:3, which is pretty fun. Would have preferred it if it was a sepia tone like the original, though. Not that it has to be like that one, just sold that dry Midwestern feeling a bit better. But honestly, this is as fun as the movie gets. Oz gets blown to Oz in his hot air balloon, and right off the bat, everything looks so fake. Like, sure, in the original film, it had a bright artifice to it too, But here it genuinely looks bad in places, especially during the daytime scenes. You see more fantastical aspects of Oz, like more of the creatures, which at times could be fun. At times, especially during the haunted forest scene. Gotta give Homeboy one horror-esque scene to direct. But most of the dialogue scenes are shot very workmanlike, so they lack the gravitas that they want here, coupled with the pacing being extremely wonky. So he gets to the Emerald City way too quickly, but when he's asked to go kill Glinda, the movie absolutely drags until the third act. You see him unite all the different people of Oz in a very Army of Darkness-esque sequence, except not as good. Not even Bruce can save it. Oh, but this time around there are two villains, neither of which are compelling. They disappear for large chunks of the movie, never really coming off as any more than just idiots. The only scene that is remotely engaging at all is the final battle. It's so cheesy and over the top that I wish the entire movie had this tone. Also, James Franco here is James Franco. He's fine in the role, he's whatever. But he at times feels very reserved. I remember Red Letter Media saying that a young Bruce Campbell would have been more fitting for this kind of role, and I can't help but wish for that reality.
You mentioned Army of Darkness, a young Bruce Campbell in a role like this. God,
it would have been great, yeah.
I'm not such a bad guy. Or am I? Huh?
And thus was the first entry into the would-be Oz cinematic universe, which never came to pass. I understand and even respect what they were going for, but in execution, it's at best a run-of-the-mill blockbuster with some fun directional moments here and there, and at worst a noisy and obnoxious kids movie. How Oz came to Oz isn't a story I necessarily think needs to exist per se, but I'm not opposed to seeing it in a film. But when you're wishing for a movie to end halfway through, you know you simply didn't connect with it. 4 out of 10. And now we come on to Wicked, the movie whose sole success is due to Glicked. Funny enough, I actually didn't catch this in theaters. I don't know, something about sitting with this just wasn't really grabbing me, yet I did see Gladiator 2. A movie whose existence is totally justified. But is this as good as the Broadway show? I don't know, I haven't seen it. I am the only person in the United States who has seemingly not seen this live. And the reason I bring this up is because that's where a lot of the discussion is seemingly coming from, whether it's as good as the Broadway show or not. But me, being someone who hasn't seen it nor read the book, I have no frame of reference outside of just Oz in general. I'm not trying to rain on the parade of anybody who liked this, because from the sheer overwhelming success of this movie, the fans seemingly got exactly what they wanted. But for me, I didn't really like it. I can hear the theater kids tapping to come get me right now. There are plenty of individual things I liked about it, but as an overall package, it felt like I had only gotten half of an experience. Because that's exactly what happened. I mean, the entire runtime of this one film is equal to the entire Broadway show. And yes, that means I don't have the entire context for the story, but I don't feel as though I should in order to enjoy it. There are plenty of examples of part ones to stories which I love. I also don't think I need to have prior context to the story to enjoy it either. I had never had prior context to other musicals I love, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying them. But I feel like I'm being too negative, since there's plenty about it I actually liked. I like how there are nods to Oz's cinematic history, such as Universal using their classic logo, even though this is the first Oz film they've ever made. I think Munchkinland looks awesome, and you really get a sense of its scale. That was one thing from the original I wish I saw more of, since as I said, there it's the centerpiece of the film, yet we only get to see the town square. But here it's so much more alive. I also like how those beds of flowers are real flowers. And who doesn't like flowers? I like how all the Beware the Witch signs have that turn-of-the-century art style to them. Although right from the beginning is where some of my issues come in, such as the opening number not sounding diegetic at all. Not that it's bad, it's fine. It just sounds a little too pre-recorded.
The Witch of the West is dead, the wickedest witch there ever was.
But in order to achieve a movie on this scale, you need a director who can handle it. And to helm this 50% of a story, they got John M. Chu, the auteur genius behind such works as Now You See Me Too, Crazy Rich Asians, and Gem and the Holograms. But in fairness, I haven't seen any of those, so I can't really judge. Plus, there were a few directional moments I felt stood out. The Elixir guy's face never being shown was cool, and some of the editing choices are fun.
Offended by my frank analysis, think of it as personality dialysis.
The music numbers themselves were well blocked in general, especially Dancing Through Life, which this whole sequence rules.
It's just life.
In no small part due to the set design. As soon as I saw those ladder things, I'm like, yep, this is winning Best Production Design at the Oscars. And sure enough, Munchkinland, as I mentioned, the Ozdust Ballroom, and especially the Emerald City. Ooh, that looks good. It also does enough to have its own identity while keeping what makes the Emerald City interesting. Whereas Return to Oz went a bit too far in the other direction, which ended up looking kind of bland. This hits the sweet spot of looking like the 39 film and fleshing it out to feel more like a livable city. Also, it's very Art Deco inspired. Love me some Art Deco. The Enchanted Forest or whatever looked cool, albeit a bit artificial looking. Those flower things were cool too. I want one. I also enjoyed a lot of the other production elements, such as the costumes. Elphaba's glasses always stuck with me. If I wore glasses, I'd get a pair like that. But I don't, because I'm not a nerd like you. Cynthia Erivo was great as Elphaba and was kind of the best part of the film. Ariana Grande was better than I expected her to be, especially with her more ditzy demeanor. Like this one small moment cracked me up pretty good.
Your name?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Although I still wonder how Amanda Seyfried would have been had she been cast instead, since apparently they were neck and neck for the part. But it's not fair to compare a performance that does exist with one that doesn't. Also, I understand that she's responsible for like half of this, so from a marketing perspective, I get it. Where my problems chiefly come in with the film is in its story. This part 1 of a story is nearly 3 hours long and is the same length as the entire Broadway show. So if you feel this has padding, you'd be correct. There's a good hour chunk in the middle that didn't amount to much and felt extremely stretched out. Like all the animal stuff was just not presented in an engaging way. Elphaba and Galinda's friendship felt kind of rushed. Almost as if the movie was like, we gotta get the plot moving, kiss and make up already. Which is resolved when Elphaba starts voguing in that one scene, which, I'm sorry, is cringe. Because when they eventually make it to Oz, you're saying, oh, the movie's basically wrapping up now. And they let Glinda in for what reason exactly? Didn't really take the time to explain that one. Nah, whatever. But once the final number happens, it feels as if the movie just sort of stops. It really feels like not that much was accomplished in the nearly 3 hours it took to tell this one half of a story. I know I keep harping on this, but it's the biggest issue with the movie. I'm sure my opinion will change once I see the second one, because again, I have no context of where the story is going. I can guess. I went into this wanting to like it, and as I've said, there's a lot of individual things that I did. I like that a big budget Hollywood musical can still capture the zeitgeist the way this did. There was a point in time where you couldn't escape this movie. And it did have a lot of personality to it. Well, more than most movies on this scale. I oddly liked all the mispronunciations of stuff.
You know, every other professor manages to pronounceify my name.
Someone wrote those horrendous words.
She always makes me the most hideous hats. I mean, isn't that place somewhat illegal? And scandalocious.
Only wish there was more of it. But coupling this with the story, the at times iffy effects, weird sound choices, and ugly cinematography. I know everyone has complained about this, but holy shit, this is bland. Would it kill you to set up like one more light to make it dynamic? Again, my opinion will probably change after the second one comes out, but for now I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10, closer to a 6. Sorry everybody. Okay, so full transparency to my audience, I've been working on this video for a very long time, but because of a long-term project, which some of you know about, I wasn't able to get it out when I wanted it to. Originally, I would have liked it to be out a couple weeks before Wicked for Good has come out, but it has now come out for good, so I'm now going to show you my unabashed, detailed review of Wicked for Good. Well, that's all of them. Surely, right? I mean, there couldn't be another studio or nation that'd be crazy enough to make one of these, right? Especially one not guarded by their own nuclear arsenal to almost shield themselves from criticism. Yep, so in my research I found yet another. The influence of Oz has spread so far and wide it's made its way all the way to the magical land of Russia. Yep, those wacky Russians have even tried their hand at this story. Kind of. Because believe it or not, this is actually based on a 1939 book called The Wizard of the Emerald City, which in and of itself is a retelling of the original book. The main difference being that it's worse. I haven't read this one, nor do I intend to, but if I were to go off this one alone, it does the classic move of overcomplicating the original story for the sake of trying to make it more interesting. How did they do this, you may ask? Well, I may as well show you. Now, full transparency, this movie isn't technically available anywhere in the US, so I had no choice but to use other means to obtain it. Hey, listen, I was left with no choice. Come and get me, Putin. So the movie opens with this admittedly cool flyby shot of Oz, but also they don't call it Oz at any point in the movie. Like, not once do they refer to it as the land of Oz or anything. Even the official description on IMDb says, an unknown world. So if it's not referred to as an Oz movie, why the hell am I reviewing it? Screw it. The Wicked Witch of the East, here named Jinjama, is trying to take over the world of some shit with her munchkin henchmen. But also this bird sidekick who occasionally shows up too. See what I mean by the story being overcomplicated? Who doesn't like more side characters? Also, unlike almost all of them, this is a modern retelling. Ellie, and her parents are taking a vacation into the beautiful Russian countryside. But her family is mad at how much of a screenager she is and takes her phone away. Right as they do, a tornado happens to appear, taking Ellie and Toto in their camper and whisking them away. But when they arrive in the world, they accidentally land on the Wicked Witch, killing her immediately. But it turns out all of this was ordained as Gingerelle herself deliberately conjured the tornado to bring Dorothy to them. Ellie, fuck. For what reason, I couldn't tell you. Also, this just kind of makes her seem like an idiot. Oh, and Toto can talk in this version.
Did you say that?
Who, me? Nope. Dogs don't talk.
But his name is actually Tobias.
My name is Tobias.
But why Tobias?
Tobias!
Not sure what the point of that change is, but yeah. Tobias. The henchman tells the other Munchkins that she's a hero and that he's their new ruler. But the rest of the Munchkins think he's a loser, yelling at him to stay in his lane.
Orphan Joss! But you're just an ordinary Munchkin like us! How can you rule over us? You're one of us!
The Munchkins also get their name from the fact that they're always chewing or munching at all times. Haha, clever, Ellie doesn't care about how they think she's a god sent to kill their enslaver and just wants to go home. They tell her the only person who can is the wizard and that she has to go to the Emerald City. But before she does, she has to take 3 others with her.
If on her quest, she helps 3 magical creatures fulfill their most dearest wishes.
Making friends on her own and all that feeling organic. It's a side quest for her to accomplish. Oh, the shoes here are silver again. We see the Wicked Witch's castle, which I'll admit is kinda sick looking. It's like a gothic version of Big Ben. The witch here looks exactly the same as the one from earlier. The Munchkin guy, all mad from the fact that everyone made fun of him, wants to take over the Munchkin country. So he makes a deal to help get the shoes back in exchange for letting him become a dictator. Munchkin-alini. Along her travels, she hits the normal beats you'd expect, meeting the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. Oh, excuse me, the Iron Woodsman? But I want to say it's crazy how all over the place this movie feels in its production values. The effects and sets are overall to a very high standard, but then you have things like the design of the Scarecrow, who just does not fit in this world. Who looks so out of place next to the Tin Man. I mean, Iron Woodsman. The man, yeah, how about that, who overall looks pretty good. And along her travels, she comes across this random guy who was hired by the witch to kidnap her and just assumes he's the wizard. He has this giant pot to trap her in, but is like, oh, this will send you back to Russia, trust me. But luckily the other 2 show up just in time to stop him. And instead of thanking them, she gets all upset and storms off? God, there's a lot of filler in this story. Oh yeah, because they wanted to split into 2 movies. Why? I'll explain why I think in a bit. They all kiss and make up before going into the poppy field, passing out, need to be rescued, yada yada yada, you know the drill. This time they were saved by a colony of mice, which, believe it or not, is a holdover from the original book. So, good job, you crazy Russians. But the third act is this big action set piece on a bridge where they need to use gravity to get each other across the gaps that are just big enough, all while fighting off some enemies. Remind you of anything? Yep, so this whole movie is an attempt to Lord of the Rings-ify Oz, which is just what I was saying this series always had the potential to do. But here it always feels like they're taking it just a bit too seriously. Like, there's plenty of times I genuinely forgot I was watching an Oz movie because of how epic the tone is trying to be. So I don't know, let's check back in a few years and see if the Russians have made a fully expanded Oz universe. The movie ends with them walking to the Emerald City and the evil bird telling the wizard. So I guess he's in cahoots with the witch? I guess? Maybe? Oh, we'll see about it in the sequel. Hopefully it has editing as awful as it was here. Yeah, this movie was torturously bad. The characters, except for the man, were all obnoxious, and the tone and pacing were all over the place. I debated not even watching it, but I am glad that I did because I can see no matter how many wars Russia starts around the world, they're still incapable of making a good Oz movie. 2 out of 10, closer to a 3, like it matters, I don't care. Oz is a world that, while it may be a little bit of a mess in its cinematic history, is here to stay. Every now and again we'll get a new Oz movie, but we'll never get something that truly permeates the culture like the original did. Sometimes there's a big fuss over movies such as Wicked, but nothing like we saw with the 39 film. One can only speculate. Or we can hold out hope that the Russians have finally cracked the winning formula. And yes, while most of these films kinda suck, like, my god, it's astounding how many of these are just outright bad, I have always had a soft spot for them. Their imagination, their characters, their moments, they really do have something for everyone.
Will Oz always be with us? Yeah, I think so. I mean, enough people know and like it to keep it relevant. Like Monster Cereal. So I hope someday we get the Oz cinematic universe that we truly deserve. Because I haven't seen enough of that goddamn donkey. After 4 movies, I'm obsessed. I need more of it. Every one of these films is lesser because they don't have the donkey. Even in the 39 film, it is just nothing without the goddamn donkey. I need the donkey.